So, this is Liege of Games. This is the super secret video that I didn't want to prompt any excitation for or any leaking for, because I feared that somebody else would hear me talking about this and want to do it and beat me to the punch, because I am also not the fastest in getting this stuff out. This is me ranking all 49 Kickstarter projects from CMON before the release of their 50th. Yeah, that's including, I'm going to rank things that are unreleased, unplayed, and I'm just going to put my subjective opinion all over them in a 49 through 1 ranking. Is it going to be controversial? Absolutely. Are you going to agree with it? Absolutely not. Is it going to be fun to talk about it and debate about it in the same time? Absolutely. Let's do this. That's all I got. There's no preamble, because this is going to be a long video as it is, so we're going to hyperspace cracking through as many of these as we can in a shorter period of time as possible. So if you're interested, let's go. Now here we are. We are going to get to the nitty gritty. I'm going to rank all 49 projects. So you'll excuse me if we sort of breeze through some of the later ones in ranking so that we can get to the meat of the discussion with some of these more well-known ones. Because believe it or not, CMON has been around on Kickstarter since the early 2010s. And a lot of these early projects actually also raised a surprising amount of money if you go back and look at it from that side of things. Looks like we are going to do something after all. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. Number 49 to the screen. Look, it's not a game, so it's going to end up lowest on this list. I mean, CMON, cool, mini. This is the miniature part of things. Miniature basing system. There you go. That's 49. You can get a bunch of bases. A bunch of companies nowadays are doing this, but when this was done, I mean, this was something newer-ish, pre-made bases that you could buy. So there you go. That's all you need to know about number 49, because we're going to skip over it really fast because it was just that. Now, number 48, we're going to go straight into the Guilds of Cadwallon, which, again, 116,000 as a 3x3 grid, tic-tac-toe-esque auction, area control style mechanism of game with an abstract theme. But obviously, since we're talking about cool mini or not, they threw in minis with it as well. Fast, easy to play. $25 back then would get you a copy with all the stretch goals. Right now, you can get a copy of it for about $20 from Miniature Market if you want. Again, nothing special to write home about. Not necessarily the miniatures adding a whole lot of value there. Auction going over several rounds, trying to make chaotic fun into pattern building. It actually got a Board Game Geek nominee for Abstract of the Year of 2013. So take that as you will. That's number 48. Number 47, we're going to go to Kaosball, which was sort of Eric Lang's attempt at sort of the Blood Bowl sort of thing in 2014, which again raised, $356,000. Nothing to sneeze at. But as far as all the reviews go and sort of the attempts to copy some of the other styles that are out there in this sports fantasy themed-esque realm, it was not nearly as well received. And interesting, Gabe and Tycho from Penny Arcade, I didn't even realize they were in this. That's awesome. Little shout out to them. They're doing cool stuff. I wish I could play games with them. That'd be awesome. Really, I want to go play D&D with them. Like, that would be at like a Penny Arcade Expo, a PAX. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I mean, you get all of your basic tropes of creams, of teams and creatures, and a little bit of everything else under the sun. But overall, it was one of those games where I don't think a lot of people were really holding on to it from that side of things. And I think the comparisons are nowadays, if you compare them to what else is out there, that people are going to tell you to look elsewhere. So that is number 47. Now, number 46, we are getting to Relic Knights, which raised a freaking fantastic hyperspace kraken, almost $1 million. $909,000 with this science fiction, anime-styled, chibi-esque with a combination of soda pop miniatures game where you are skirmishing, right? This is skirmishing. And it is a revision of the smash hit, they say, that was outshone by soda pop miniatures, if you remember them, Super Dungeon Explorer. I'm not going to get into that side of things, but it's a lot of anime and styles, a lot of sci-fi really there, and it's skirmish. So again, nothing to write home about, nothing that people are reminiscing for or vaunting for right now nowadays. And again, it's pretty expensive for what it was. $270 even at that point back then for 3 of everything. I mean, that's a lot. 3 of everything. Why would you need 3 of everything? I guess if you're doing the Warhammer side of things, I guess you need more of the same units. But, I mean, again, that's a lot of money back then, especially. I dare say that was probably one of the top funded ones back in 2013, 2014 when it finished. So anyway, there you go. Now, 45, we're going to get into Rivet Wars. This is a little bit of a more in-depth game. This is more of a real-time strategy board game. Basically World War I with a whole bunch of advanced technology, including tanks and missiles and all sorts of everything else that you could want. Again, raising almost $600,000, which, again, wasn't very impressive at that time. Again, big pledge levels already. So, I mean, for those of you that are looking at this and going, CMON's really jacked up the prices a bunch since, like almost a decade ago. They really haven't. $90 right here. Now the base pledges for a lot of their games are somewhere between $90 and $110. So it really hasn't gone up that much. I mean, you can say content-wise, maybe it's changed, or quality-wise, it's definitely changed. But here you go. $150 for promo heroes and 2 faction as well. So interestingly, though, the $90 doesn't get you the stretch goals, or the stretch bonuses, as they were calling them then. Again, skirmish game, a little bit different, real-time strategy where you're going head-to-head. So something very different and very aesthetically, stylishly different, but you can still see where the themes come with a lot of the other chibi games that we're going to be seeing on this list, and that is why it's number 45. Number 44, we're going to get into Sedition Wars. This is the deep space horror game, which was really sort of one of their first adventures into anything apart from Zombicide, because Zombicide was the very first game, and we'll get to that in this list later. But this is a reimplementation of that. And again, you can see $80 for the copy with the signed cover art and everything from the quarantine zone. So, I mean, is what it is. But this is the first one where you're going to see all of this stuff, and their model hasn't changed too much, right? Look at all these add-ons. So you're not getting a lot different. Now, this is, again, a dungeon crawl, a sci-fi, future episodes, miniatures, miniatures, miniatures. And the page is absolutely massive too. I mean, look how much I'm scrolling down here for stretch goals and all of the other stuff. So again, something that is definitely noticeable, but at 44, it's still not making much of an imprint on the community 7 or 8 years later. Now, number 43, I've still seen this one floating around a little bit. This is Wrath of Kings, which again raised almost $750,000 as, again, a war game with epic fantasy. Notice how, again, beautiful miniatures, right? Okay. Seeing a theme here? Okay. Factions, though. If you're going to see something else along the lines of this, this is obviously why CMON was not doing their first attempt in this realm of things when they came out with the more recent A Song of Fire and Ice, because they've had practice in this setting already. And so again, 2 factions 100, 5 factions is 200. Also, pledge locking miniatures, content locking at the higher levels. There you go. Early birds, and this is where you start to see a little bit of their early birds go, which again, you'll see a prevalent plethora of them throughout many campaigns, but then they have ultimately eventually dropped it as well now. So interesting to know from that side of things. And back then, especially, people were really concerned about price point per miniature. So 220 miniatures for $200, people were looking at that as a good price point for less than $1 a miniature, especially from CMON, which again was more established on that side of things in the first place. So again, I don't think anything to write home about. I don't think anything outstanding. I don't think people are clamoring for it nowadays, but I've seen it pop up every now and again, even, recently within the last month or two. So it definitely had a little bit more staying power than the other ones previously on this list. And again, I'm obviously completely subjective on this, so you can argue with me and tell me how wrong I am in the comments section. I'll probably tell you that several times during this video, and you'll probably get more and more upset at me as we go on. So let's just do it. 42 and 41, we're going to go back to back here. We're going to go Zombicide and Zombicide Season 2. Now, which one is which? Take your pick. I'm throwing it down this low, and because I'm basing it only on what it is bringing, because the evolutions of Zombicide, I'll tell you this right now, are going to be much higher up because of their, again, long-standing appeal, but I cannot discount in 41 and 42 the branching point that this was as the mainstay in CMON's arsenal. All of a sudden, you got $2.2 million because it was one of those, even though it raised almost $800,000 the first time around, it really didn't take hold, and it really didn't sink in to people being something different that we really hadn't seen a lot in the likes of. I'm not going to say it wasn't out there, but there wasn't anything similar-esque that could be played at all levels-ish before this. 9,000 backers, 2.2 million. And this was the start of the stretch goal blow up, essentially. and a little bit of everything. Some of this stuff, some of the rarer stuff on this side of things is still somewhat difficult to come by with some of these early 1s, 2s, and 3s in terms of the exclusives. And I know people are selling them and even buying them up still at ridiculous price points for what they are. And again, with the core pledge of a CMON game, this just goes to show, even in number 2, you were getting a ton of value already. And again, look at all of these add-ons. Let's just count up here for a second. Let's see, let's get to the bottom here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 26 optional add-ons there. There you go. That was the start of the binging of expansion add-ons. Now, this is the most recent game on the list to this point, which, you know, is really pretty recent. It's Munchkin, but it's a dungeon crawl Munchkin. And for all the reasons, I'm not a huge fan of Munchkin. And then you combine them with a dungeon crawl and you throw in extra miniatures on top of it. I mean, just think of the regular game of Munchkin and then think about adding miniatures in there. Again, I mean, I can see the appeal. I can see the wide base that you're going to appeal to, but it only got 700,000 and it maybe not as widely appealing as people thought in the first place. Again, a little bit lower price point, along with several of these other games on here, like similar to Masmora, if you will. And it's just doing a push your luck, take that head-to-head adventure style game. And again, this one is going to be an easier get to the table, and that's why people wanted it in the first place. And it's got kind of nice miniatures for my kids. Like, I can put these out on the table and not have any fear. And so that was at least the appeal. Now, is it actually going to be adding anything or something that you're going to really want to play with your kids? I mean, that's a whole nother debate, and I'll let you guys debate that in the comment section. But that's why I'm including it number 40, because, I mean, it's bringing a new IP into the world of CMON, and a little bit of everything else to go along with it. But, I mean, Munchkin Cthulhu. I mean, things you never thought you knew that you needed. There you go. That's why it's number 40. Now, number 39, we're going to get right out here and say CMON Comics. And because it was a comic book collection, and it was $500,000 for comic books with a couple exclusives for these 3 games. The Zombicide 2.0, Cthulhu Death May Die, and Zombicide Invaders. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this. I'm not a completionist, but I was tempted by it because I am a big fan of Cthulhu Death May Die. Spoilers. And so, again, I don't feel like I need everything, but there was definitely a temptation with what they were adding when it came to this in terms of these 6 new survivors and a couple extra bad guys and some comic book-ish stuff. But I would be hard-pressed to say anything, but most people bought it for the stuff, not necessarily the comics. So that is why it's a little bit higher as another non-game entity on this list. And because if you wanted to get just one, you could just get $30. And so $30 for one of these sets nowadays, I guarantee you, like the Cthulhu Death May Die one is not going for $30 on the secondary market. So I don't know what it is going for, but it's probably 2 or 3 times the price. So there you go. That's number 39. Number 38, this is the original Rum and Bones. 2 to 6 players, more of one of the first MOBAs without being a true MOBA. But, you know, there was a little bit of bloat with it in terms of the factions, in terms of the amount of stuff that was there. And it just wasn't as fully balanced as people like. And so it was dealt some criticism in those aspects, and some of those were redeemed later on with the sequel Second Tide, which is obviously higher up on the list just for those reasons. But it was something different. We hadn't really seen a lot of pirate stuff. We hadn't really seen a lot of MOBA games or things of that ilk. This was sort of MOBA before MOBA became the huge online phenomenon that has sort of taken over the internet and PC gamers from the last couple years. That's the interesting thing from that standpoint. And again, early bird, $90, $100. That was it. And I liked it when they only had those 2, but you're getting a whole bunch of stuff again. You're getting a whole bunch of expansions. But look at all this stuff, right? And again, they sort of do the mix between Kickstarter exclusive and non-Kickstarter exclusive. And again, if you want some of those, it's been real difficult to get them. This game was a mixed bag because people hadn't really had something like this before, but it just wasn't quite what they also expected, I guess, when people actually got it. This type of game still has very little appeal to me, and that's also the reason it's probably a little lower on this list than some of you guys may like. So there you go, my subjectivity. That's what this list is all about. Number 38. Number 37 is Night of the Living Dead, the different iteration on Zombicide with, you know, cult horror-esque classic crossover. it just didn't hit home with a lot of people. I mean, you can see why. $430,000, which is a lot lower than most of the other things I've actually already featured on this list, even in the high 40s. Just because, again, it wasn't different enough, I feel like. With all the other Zombicides you've seen since then, before and after, they have done something different to depart from the usual. And I think people looked at this, and again, I don't think this was a niche within a niche. Like, people are okay with horror, but this was like horror within horror. Again, slightly lower price point, but what did it do that made it that much different and better apart from the IP? And again, I can't speak to what made this one different. I'm not gonna lie and tell you, oh yeah, it was clearly this way and this way, but it just, didn't clearly click home with people because they want what they want. They don't want a tie-in. That's the problem with some of these IPs where you're trying to tie in stuff that maybe isn't as appealing. And I don't know if it was a licensing thing. I don't know if it was a relationship thing, but it just clearly fell short of probably internal expectations. And I don't know if we'll see something like this again, for better or for worse. But that's why it's on the list, because it needs to be somewhere too. So there you go. Now, number 36 here, this actually raised much lower than almost everything else that we've talked about on the list, but it was a different departure for CMON. One of the few games on this list with relatively few to none in terms of the miniature side of things, and that is Xenoshyft Onslaught. It was a base defense deck building game, which is a great concept in theory, but it's very hard in execution, and this game was very swingy, very hit or miss, and you had people, especially with the high level of difficulty, not always feeling like they were in the most control. And as a co-op game, and as something experimental, it worked. At the same time, it didn't live up to the expectations, and it sort of also fell flat in terms of wanting to make you play it again from that side of things. And again, just like Rum Bones did with the sequel, I would argue that the sequel for this, Dreadmire, took some of the weaknesses and made it better, but clearly it's not one that I see being highly sought after or highly desired on the deck building side of things. And again, it's not one that's in my collection, and I'm a big deck building person. So this is one of the first videos that I remember seeing of someone else besides the CMON internal group playing it as well. So that's always a bit of a shift, and we'll see that definitely with some of the newer ones. We've also shifted video-wise from that side of things, but just a cool concept. Just a cool concept, and I hope that someone else uses this concept and modifies it and makes it much better, and especially because we don't have a lot of tower defense-esque games like this in the first place, and I want to see more of it because, I think it could be outstanding with a few tweaks and modifications. Speaking of things that needed a few tweaks and modifications, number 35, we are up to World of Smog on Her Majesty's service. Again, another departure on the CMON listing of what the trends of a lot of the other things before and after this sort of revolved around. This was a little bit more of a worker placement style game in the steampunk setting World of Smog, which is a fantabulous world in the first place. Again, spoilers, the other one is much higher. And this is 2 to 4 players rotating around this moving board, trying to capture these artifacts and win the game. You are heavy board manipulating in this game. Heavy interaction on the board side of things in the first place. Hybrid strategy, but very swingy. And there's some argument about how well it was balanced and sort of how much you're actually having decision making apart from following the person in front of you to optimize whatever they did to allow you to get the best action on your turn as well. So again, lower price point, definitely on the lower end of things from the CMON side of things. And again, didn't raise nearly as much with only 100,000. It's kind of fallen under the radar, but I think it did something different, and I applaud them. And I think this is, again, a mechanism that could be done well in the future or has been re-implemented in other games since then to a better degree. And that is why it's number 35 on the list. Speaking of innovation, if this had been more successful, this could have been much, much higher on the list. And this is Besieged, Sons of the Abyss, a true tower defense game where you have monsters attacking from all 4 sides of the board all at once. It reminds me of a miniature version of Last Bastion. And the problem with Last Bastion was and is that it's just very swingy and not very balanced. And some things are just overpowered, some things are underpowered. There's too much luck that cannot be fully mitigated. And otherwise, it's a really cool concept. Again, I don't think it's necessarily anything tremendous or outstanding, but I think in terms of games like this and Castle Panic, giving it a little bit difference. Now, again, I guess you could make the argument that this is a blinged out Castle Panic. And as a not really a fan of Castle Panic, how much different is it? I don't know. But again, I'm going to say I wish they would step outside their comfort zone, especially now that we've seen the evolution of their game design, and go back to something more a little bit outside of the box from this side of things. Because again, the potential is there, but with all of the price points nowadays, I'm almost glad that they don't, so that I don't have to wonder whether or not it's worth the risk. There you go, Besieged Sons of Abyss. Now, number 33, Xenoshyft Dreadmire, which we were just talking about. Sort of the second version of Xenoshyft. And again, you can see the other one raised just over 100,000. This was almost 4 times that at just under 400,000. Deck building, defense-based game, slightly more expensive, a few more add-ons, and just a little bit darker overall with a little bit more stuff. But look at how much exclusive stuff, again, from a card game. That's really demoralizing if you are getting it at the base game retail level of looking at all this cards that you're going to be missing potentially. And are you going to get an incomplete game? And we'll talk about that in several other games that come up later on the list. But that's the big concern with something like this, with all of these Kickstarter exclusive FOMOs and, you know, a few less expansions than the previous games. But yeah, I mean, the other problem with this game, as cool as it is, as great as it captures the imagination with the asymmetry and the deck building and the slowly becoming more powerful, is again, the difficulty curve was just massively too much from those that played it. And it became too swingy, and it was, you know, again, not a game that you could play in an hour. I mean, that's the good thing about Aeon's End nowadays, right? If I want to get an Aeon's End, it's going to take me an hour, hour and a half max. You know, people were saying this is anywhere through play all through the rounds of like plus of 2 to 3 or more hours. And from a deck building game, that's a long time. That is a long, long time, unless you can keep me fully engaged. But again, this has some of the coolest concepts you'll see in this genre in the first place. But the fact that they just couldn't quite implement them with a full degree of certainty and perfection sort of makes it much lower on the list, as much as I prefer this genre over most of the other things that we're going to be talking about on this list in the first place. And the lower price point with no miniatures makes it even more appealing, but because of its faults, that's where it falls in the line of number 33. So now number 32, we have Rum Bones Second Tide. As I talked about, this miniature-based game, the second iteration of this MOBA-type pirate-themed game, raising almost $1 million, taking some of the criticisms that the first one got and changing it around a little bit. Again, you can still see the Kickstarter early bird there, and just revamping it from that side of things. A little bit of everything. Again, exclusive. Look at all these huge optional packs and optional buys. I think this is actually one of the bigger ones when it came to like $500 or $600 all in, as opposed to some of the other ones in this or around this time. Again, taking control of 1 or 2 deadly crews and going up head to head with your number of heroes, depending on the class, depending on which side you have. There you go, right? A little bit of everything. So that was the question of how much better was it? Is it actually better? Do people like it more? There's a lot more there. And if you actually go over to the page, it has a 7.7 overall rating on Board Game Geek. I mean, I know, right? But, you know, it is what it is. And now Rum Bones, the original, has a 6.9. And they both have about the same amount of ratings, so you have to feel that they're going to be a similar crowd. And so people definitely thought that the second one was better. It showed in terms of money, and clearly they just addressed some of the issues. Still, again, MOBA-esque, pirate theme, not for me. Again, I think the balance was still a little bit of a concern at times. And it's a theme that has definitely not appealed to everyone in terms of the MOBA side of things as well. And that's why we really haven't seen them go probably as back to that as we've seen other games and other independent publishers try their hand at it as well. So Rum Bones Second Tide. Next up on 31, we actually have Arcadia Quest Riders, probably the least heralded Arcadia Quest on that side of things. Only $316,000. If you would have asked me prior to this, I actually would have guessed less. I think it classically took the Arcadia Quest Riders and just gave it too much. Too much going on, too much stuff, too many things to deal with. You had Arcadia Quest, then you had the Inferno and the Angels and the Demons, and then you had the pets, and now you have riders on top of everything else, and it was really exclusive. There were these print runs, and whether or not you could get them, and just how much it would be available on the secondary market, and there really wasn't a whole lot from that side of things, and it was expensive for the smaller amount of stuff that you were getting. I mean, $65 for this amount of stuff was not that appealing to people. And so this is probably in the Arcadia Quest, and this is going to be my opinion, obviously, that this was probably the least popular of all of these. The least popular expansion, the least popular campaign, and the least interesting from that side of things. Again, more heroes, more mounts, a little bit of everything. They also did the separate thing where you got a little bit of exclusive pack and a little bit of the separate ones you could buy. But again, and Arcadia Quest, too much of a good thing, almost, essentially. But it's still Arcadia Quest, and it's still well thought of, so that's why it's on the list at this point. That's it. 49 through 31. Teased? Like that? I didn't even plan it that way. That CMON was going to tease their 50th campaign right as I was getting ready to launch this. I just sort of had psychic wavelengths with them, and now you can tune in and check out the rest of the list as it comes out over the next 2 weeks before the supposed maybe launch at the end of the month. Who knows? But, and in case it wasn't completely obvious, completely, objectively subjective list. That's all I got. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Let me know what you think is going to be up higher on the list. Okay, there you go. Stay classy. I'll see you around.